Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you, Sir Edward, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I'd like to congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Islwyn, for securing this vitally important debate. Sir Edward, I wanted to start by paying tribute to all those across my Aberavon constituency, and indeed across Wales and the UK, for doing their bit to fight this pandemic. Community groups in Aberavon sprung into action to help residents across our community, to help with food shopping, prescription pickups, and so many other forms of support, often just with acts of human kindness. Demand on our food banks has increased dramatically, and I would like to thank the Port Talbot, Briton Ferry, Carmarthen and Skewen Salvation Army food banks, as well as Age Cymru West Glamorgan, for making sure those in most in need in our community are not going without. Our key workers have, of course, played an absolutely pivotal role as well. Our health and social care workers have been right on the front line of this fight, working so hard in the toughest of conditions. But so also have so many of our other unsung heroes, such as our transport workers, our waste disposal men and women, our food producers, our steel workers, and many more who've kept our economy going even during the national lockdown. Manufacturers have also played a critical role. I've visited local Aberavon firms who've shown incredible innovation and flexibility and adaptability in producing essential frontline equipment, including the BOC, which has kept our Welsh NHS stocked with oxygen, the Ministry of Furniture, also in my constituency, which has flipped on a sixpence to start producing shields and screens for frontline workers, and a company called Rototherm, which has turned its hand to PPE, again really moving from core business to a very different type of activity almost in the blink of an eye. It's been truly inspirational to witness this community effort. I've also been profoundly impressed by my local authority, Neath Port Talbot's response, and of course by the Welsh Government, as many of my honourable friends have already pointed out. Our First Minister has led by example. He's followed the science, he's provided adequate support for business and individuals where it is the Welsh Government's responsibility and capability to do so, and the £300 million of financial support to firms and workers to help them through this upcoming firebreak lockdown is really a case in point. This is leadership, and it is truly welcome and much needed. Contrast that, as a number of my honourable friends have already observed, with the events in Greater Manchester, where the UK Conservative government is certainly failing to deliver on its levelling up rhetoric. One specific issue that my constituents regularly raise is the need for more support from the Chancellor for the self-employed. Creative industry workers have told me that their work has dropped off a cliff, and because of the nature of their employment, short-term PAYE contracts, freelance and so on, many of them fall outside the income support schemes. But we also need far more support for our steel workers. Sir Edward, the Port Talbot Steelworks is the biggest employer in my constituency by far, but Tata Steel has fallen through the cracks in the UK government schemes and is yet to receive any emergency funding or loans. It took the French and German governments a matter of just weeks to provide their major steel producers with the finance to cover their short-term cash flow issues, which are, of course, due to the impact of the pandemic. And yet still, there is not a penny from the UK government for the British steel industry, and the UK government continues to sit on its hands. Steel workers are key workers. The steel industry continues to operate and serve our country through this current crisis and will be critical to rebuilding our economy after it. It is the backbone of modern manufacturing, and it should be noted that every other sizable economic power in the world has a significant steel industry. It's also far greener to make steel in the UK than it is to import it. And there's lots of incredible work, particular projects such as the specific project at the Innovation Centre in Swansea Bay campus in partnership with Tata Steel, which is making steel-based materials that form the basis for photovoltaic cells, potentially turning every building in our country into a power station. Steel is very much a 21st century industry, and it's the backbone of our economy and our manufacturing sector. We need our steel industry, yet the industry can only get through this crisis with government support because of the extraordinary nature of the situation in which we find ourselves. Part of the reason that the steelworks needs this short-term support is also, of course, because the government over the last 10 years has consistently failed to back the UK steel industry with the long-term support that it requires. The UK government has not offered a sector deal similar to the one that is in place with industries like aerospace and construction, and has not done enough to create the policy framework around energy prices, procurement, dealing with the dumping of steel from countries like China that is needed to form the foundation for a strong and healthy steel industry. So the message to the UK government is clear. We need our steel. There can be no post-pandemic economic recovery without a strong and healthy steel industry, and the government should be backing the industry to the hilt. Sir Edward, it's not just the steel industry that the UK government has failed to back in the long term. The impact of 10 years of austerity on public services in Wales, including a reduction in the Welsh Government's grant, has impacted on the ability of local services to meet the challenge that this pandemic poses. Neath Talbot Council has had to remove £90 million from its budget since 2010 and is expected to find another £50 million reduction by 2025. Now coronavirus has hit, meaning that, like other councils across the UK, both the extra spend and the loss of revenue will each run into the millions. And this really is going to be a test of resilience for public services whose resilience has been undermined over the last decade. Local councillors need the Chancellor to heed the words of the local government secretary in May, when he promised that, and I quote, "The government stands by councils at this time and will do whatever is necessary." Well, so far there's scant evidence of the UK government making good on this pledge, but it needs to, because whatever is necessary needs to mean what it says. Take also the long-term issue of strategic independence. I recently visited one local company which has turned its hand to manufacturing PPE for the Welsh NHS in a truly flexible and inspirational way. But what was really came home to me during that visit was that at that point there were no Welsh companies making PPE for the Welsh NHS, and because the whole supply chain had been moved offshore to countries like China. Every single one of the firm's employees that I spoke with expressed their profound concerns about the way in which our sovereign capability has been eroded to the point where we're left dangerously exposed and over-reliant on other countries, and frequently those countries are certainly not allies of ours and of our national interest and national security. The UK government must therefore understand that when we talk about supporting UK businesses through COVID-19, we do also need to have an eye on the future and the reliance and resilience that UK manufacturers would bring to the economy. We cannot go on in a situation where so much of our critical infrastructure is exposed to forces that we cannot control. Finally, Sir Edward, I wanted to touch on the issue of skilling and reskilling. After the pandemic, we're going to need significant investment in vocational training for my constituents and people across the country to help them get back into the job market, because there is, I'm afraid, going to be a huge shift, people losing their jobs. We're going to need to retrain those people, bring them back into the labour market. Skilling and reskilling programmes have frequently been funded but through European structural funds in Wales and in other economically challenged parts of the United Kingdom. That money will disappear in January when the transition period ends, leaving a huge black hole. The UK government has promised that a UK shared prosperity fund will replace EU development funding, but we still know next to nothing about the SPF. How much money will be in the envelope? What development programmes will it cover? What will be the focus of those programmes? and who will be in charge of administering the scheme. There is a tremendous risk that the UK government will undertake both a money grab and a power grab from the devolved nations with regard to how that development funding is going to be spent. We've even recently heard suggestions that the UK government plans to funnel money directly into marginal seats or Conservative held seats in what can be described as the worst sort of pork barrel politics. It's frankly unacceptable that we're just 2 months away from the day in which the Shared Prosperity Fund is supposed to be launched, and yet we have no idea about its overall size, focus or governance. This is yet another example of the UK Conservative government treating the nations, regions and local areas of our United Kingdom with contempt. As chair of the all-party group on post-Brexit funding, I'll be working closely with colleagues to hold the government to account and to ensure that they deliver on their promises. And so I think it's with those words I'd like to close, Sir Edward, simply by saying that we have seen some inspiring examples in all of our local communities. We all do now need to pull together in the interests of those communities and of our constituents and of our entire country in this time of crisis. But that is going to require leadership, it's going to require investment, and it's going to require a new way of working across our United Kingdom. And we certainly look forward to the Minister's comments on all of those.